A mother bear appears at a family's door with her cub. When they see what happens next, they can't believe it. In the quiet heart of northwestern Montana, Blair Archer thought she knew the rhythm of her days, the wind through the trees, the slow rising of the mist, the ordinary peace of her world. Until one morning, when something appeared at her doorstep, something wild, something impossible. And with it came a story no one could have predicted, a story of memory, of trust, and of a bond that even time could not break. What arrived that day would change everything. The morning broke soft over the farmstead, the mist lifting slowly off the fields like a quilt being peeled away by invisible hands. Inside the old timber-framed house, Blair Archer cradled a steaming mug of coffee between her hands, savoring the fragile silence before the day truly began. She stepped to the living room window, brushed aside the gingham curtain, and glanced out at the gravel driveway. Her breath caught. There, standing alone in the pale gold light, was a black bear. But it wasn't the sheer size of her or the wildness she carried so effortlessly that froze Blair, it was what the bear held. A tiny cub, limp, dangling carefully from her jaws. Blair stumbled back, the coffee cup clattering into the sink behind her. "Remy," she called to her husband, her voice sharper than she intended. "You need to see this." Within seconds, Remy Archer, steady, practical Remy, was at her side, eyes narrowing as he followed her shaking finger to the scene outside. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The bear didn't pace, she didn't huff or growl. She stood perfectly still, her broad body tense, her eyes locked on the house, not with aggression, but with something else. Something deliberate. Something that almost looked like a plea. And then, carefully, the bear padded forward. Each step was slow, heavy with caution. She reached the foot of their porch, bent her massive head, and placed the cub onto the worn wooden boards. The cub didn't stir. Blair pressed her hand to her mouth, heart thundering against her ribs. This couldn't be real. Wild animals didn't behave like this. And yet, here she was. A mother, surrendering her helpless child at their doorstep. The bear backed away a few paces and sat, her black fur glistening in the early light, her breathing visible in soft puffs of mist. She made no move to leave. No move to threaten. She simply waited. Blair's fingers fumbled as she grabbed her phone, immediately calling wildlife rescue. "We have a situation," she said when someone finally answered, her voice trembling. "There's a bear. She brought her cub to us. She's just sitting there." While she waited, Blair knelt by the window again, unable to tear her eyes away. Remy stood guard at the door, one hand resting lightly on the latch, unsure whether to open it or barricade it. But deep down, Blair knew this wasn't a standoff. It was an act of trust. A mother in need had chosen them, for reasons Blair couldn't begin to guess. And now, their lives had been pulled into a story bigger than they understood. Outside, the bear shifted slightly, her gaze flickering, not to the house, but to the tiny form stretched across their porch. And somehow, Blair understood too. "Help him," the bear was saying. "Help him because I can't." The wail of a distant siren began to rise through the trees, and the morning, once so quiet, had changed forever. The distant wail of sirens grew louder, weaving through the thick morning air. Blair stood by the window, one hand pressed flat against the glass. She couldn't look away from the bear, still seated, still waiting, the limp cub lying like a fragile offering at the porch's edge. Beside her, Remy tightened his grip on the doorframe, his jaw rigid. "They'll be careful," he said, more to himself than to Blair. "They'll know what to do." A dusty white truck rumbled into view, kicking up gravel as it slowed at the edge of their property. Bright orange letters on the side read Montana Wildlife Control. A second vehicle followed close behind, its roof lights flashing muted red and blue against the mist. From the first truck, a woman stepped out, short-cropped hair, khaki uniform, and a stance that said she was used to animals twice her size. Kate, Blair realized, the officer she'd spoken to on the phone. Kate paused for a long moment, assessing the scene from behind her sunglasses. Blair rushed out onto the porch before Remy could stop her, her hands raised, signaling for caution. "She's not aggressive," Blair called softly. "She's just waiting." Kate approached with deliberate slowness, a tranq rifle slung loosely over her shoulder. She glanced at the bear, then at the cub, then back at Blair. "I don't believe what I'm seeing," Kate muttered under her breath. She motioned to her team to stay back for now. The black bear didn't move. Her eyes, dark, bottomless pools of ancient knowing, stayed fixed on Blair, unblinking. Kate lowered her sunglasses slightly. "That's not normal behavior," she said in a voice low enough that only Blair and Remy could hear. "Not for a wild bear. Not even for a desperate mother." Blair felt it too, something deeper than instinct, something that defied every protocol in the handbook Kate likely carried in her truck. One of the younger techs from Wildlife Control crept closer with a transport crate and a folded thermal blanket. Kate gave Blair a sidelong glance. "You say she brought the cub herself?" Blair nodded. "Laid it down. Stepped back. She hasn't moved since." Kate hesitated for a long moment. Her hand hovered over the tranquilizer dart slung across her chest, but then, slowly, she let it fall to her side. "All right," she said, voice steady. "We'll do this the gentle way." Moving as a unit, the rescue team approached the porch. Blair could feel the tension humming through the air like a plucked wire. Every step closer to the cub felt like stepping into sacred space. The mother bear rose to her feet, her massive frame shifting in the light. Remy stiffened behind Blair, but the bear didn't charge. Didn't roar. Instead, she let out a low, guttural sound. A deep, vibrating rumble. Not a warning. Not a threat. A plea. Kate's mouth tightened. She knelt by the cub, checking its pulse, feeling the weak, fluttering beat beneath her fingers. "Still alive," she said grimly. "Barely." The team worked quickly, wrapping the cub carefully in the blanket. The moment they lifted the tiny body, the mother bear shifted forward a half step, a low sound in her throat. But she didn't attack. She stayed rooted. Trembling. But trusting. Blair's heart felt like it might split in two. "They'll help him," she whispered aloud, unsure if she meant it for the bear or for herself. Kate shot her a glance, not skeptical anymore, but something closer to reverence. The cub was loaded gently into the truck's back compartment, the oxygen tank already humming as a vet hovered nearby. But the mother bear didn't follow. She sat back down, still and silent in the rain-damp grass, watching the house, watching the people who now carried her world away in their arms. Night fell heavy and slow over the Archer farm. The bear didn't leave. Even when the last rescue truck disappeared down the road. Even when the wind picked up and the rain began to fall in cold, steady sheets. She remained, a dark, unmoving sentinel beneath the wide Montana sky. Waiting. Hoping. Refusing to give up. And inside the house, Blair couldn't sleep. She stood by the window for hours, watching, her heart aching with a question she couldn't shake. How did she know to come here? The fluorescent lights buzzed softly inside the Puja Creek Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, An island of clinical calm against the chaos of the outside world. Dr. Don Flynn leaned over the small exam table, his gloved hands moving quickly but gently. On the padded surface before him lay the black bear cub, impossibly small, frighteningly still. Its breathing was shallow, each ragged breath whistling weakly through its nose. Its paws, curled close to its body, trembled with the barest effort to hold on. Aiden checked the heart monitor again. Too fast. Too fragile. He pressed 2 fingers lightly to the cub's thin chest, feeling the fluttering pulse like a bird's wing against his skin. "We're cutting it close," he muttered, half to himself, half to the exhausted vet tech working at his side. "Get the warm 4 fluids going. Small bore catheter, right foreleg." The tech nodded, already prepping the line. The infection was obvious, angry swelling along the cub's abdomen. An untreated wound that had gone septic. But that wasn't the only threat. Dehydration, fever, hypothermia, any one of them could have tipped the balance. If the mother had hesitated even a few more hours. But she hadn't. Aiden couldn't stop thinking about that, the black bear, risking herself, crossing into human territory to deliver her cub to strangers. Wild animals didn't behave like that. They fought. They hid. They ran. This one had asked for help. And now it was up to them to honor that plea. The first 4 slipped into place. The warm saline began to flow. The cub didn't even flinch. Too weak. Too far gone. Aiden moved next to the oxygen mask, positioning it carefully over the cub's tiny muzzle. "Come on, little one," he whispered, his voice steady but heavy with urgency. "You're not done yet. Not after everything." He adjusted the heating pad, layering a second warm towel over the cub's back. Gradually, the heart rate slowed, not dangerously, but into a rhythm that spoke of stability rather than sheer, desperate survival. After an hour, the cub's breathing deepened. Not strong, but enough. Aiden exhaled and stepped back, scrubbing a hand over his tired face. "She brought him just in time," he said quietly, to no one in particular. "Any later?" He let the thought die there. The tech looked up. "You think she'll stay? Waiting?" Aiden nodded once. She already made her choice. Outside the clinic windows, dawn was still a rumor beyond the blackness. Back at the Archer farm, under the falling rain and wide indifferent sky, a black bear sat motionless, her fur slick with water. Her head tilted slightly toward a house that no longer held her cub. She waited. And in a small, overheated treatment room, the life she had entrusted to humans clung stubbornly to hope. The rain hadn't stopped. It drummed steadily on the tin roof of the farmhouse, soaking the gravel driveway and the fields beyond, until everything shimmered in a gray, endless mist. Blair sat curled in the armchair by the window, a blanket wrapped tight around her shoulders, her eyes never leaving the motionless figure outside. The black bear, Erin, though Blair didn't yet know her name, was still there, soaked to the bone, unmoving, a dark shape hunched low in the rain. She hadn't eaten, hadn't wandered, hadn't even tried to find shelter. She simply stayed, her gaze locked on the house, on the people she had trusted to save her cub. Blair's chest ached with it. She could feel Erin's grief and fear pulsing through the glass between them, raw and wordless. This wasn't instinct anymore. This was something else, something heartbreakingly human. Around midnight, Kate called from the Wildlife Center. "Dr. Flynn says the cub's responding. The antibiotics are starting to kick in. His breathing's steadier. It's too soon to celebrate, but he's holding on." Blair let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Does she know?" she asked, her voice cracking. "The mother, I mean. Does she have any idea?" On the other end of the line, Kate hesitated. "We don't know. Animals like her, they don't usually wait around." Blair pressed her forehead against the cold windowpane, watching the rain bead and slide down the glass like silent tears. "Is there any way to let her hear something? To let her know he's alive?" There was a pause, the kind that stretched long enough to feel like doubt. Then Kate said quietly, "Maybe." Blair explained her idea, half ashamed of how desperate it sounded even as she said it. But to her relief, Kate didn't laugh. She only said, "Give me a minute." 10 minutes later, Blair's phone rang again. "We're putting you on speaker," Kate said. "The cub's resting, but he's stable enough. Talk to her." Blair swallowed hard, wiping the rain-smeared window with her sleeve. She opened the porch door a crack and stepped out, keeping herself half-sheltered by the frame. The black bear didn't move, but Blair saw her ears twitch, swiveling slightly toward the sound of the creaking door. Blair raised the phone speaker on, voice trembling but steady. "Your baby's okay," she said softly into the night. "He's safe. They're taking care of him. You did the right thing. You saved him." For a long, breathless moment, nothing happened. The rain kept falling. The fields kept whispering under the wind. And then a sound, low and deep, broke the night open. A chuff. Not a growl, not a warning, a short, breathy burst of air through the bear's nose. The sound wild bears use with their cubs, their family, those they trust. Blair's throat tightened painfully. She watched as Erin, though she didn't yet know to call her that, lowered her massive head onto her front paws, her entire body sagging into the earth as though releasing a weight she'd been carrying for days. The chuff was an answer. A thank you. Blair turned the phone back toward herself, whispering, "He's a fighter. Just like you." Inside the house, Remy hovered near the kitchen doorway, arms folded, face unreadable but tight with feeling. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer words. He just watched the woman he loved reach across a distance no science could explain, speaking a language of loyalty and memory that neither of them had ever truly understood until now. Hours passed. The rain slowed to a mist. Erin remained curled on the edge of the driveway, her massive body rising and falling in slow, steady breaths. Waiting. Trusting. Blair eventually fell asleep in the chair by the window, the phone still in her hand, the porch light casting a soft glow over the dark, wet figure outside. And though the night wore on, and though dawn seemed impossibly far away, something had changed. The waiting wasn't hollow anymore. It was filled with hope, with promise, with the fragile, powerful thread of trust, spun years ago and somehow, impossibly, still unbroken. At first light, the mist still clung to the fields around the Archer farm as if the world itself was holding its breath. Blair rubbed the sleep from her eyes and glanced out the window. The bear was still there. Through the soft haze, she could just make out Erin's massive shape, curled low against the earth, her head lifting briefly as a breeze stirred the wet grass. Still waiting. Still hoping. Blair's chest ached with the weight of it. The house phone rang, sharp and sudden in the stillness. Blair rushed to grab it, heart pounding. "Hello." "It's Kate," her voice urgent but strange, tight with something Blair couldn't place. "You need to hear this," she said. "Dr. Flynn found something." Blair clutched the phone tighter. "What is it?" After stabilizing the cub, Adon did a full check, standard procedure. He scanned for a microchip, just in case. Blair frowned. You mean like a rescue tag? Exactly. And he found one. There was a beat of silence before Kate continued, her voice softer now, as if she still couldn't quite believe it herself. The cub's mother, she's registered. 6 years ago. Riverbend Wildlife Sanctuary. Blair's breath caught. Riverbend. 6 years ago, Blair had spent a full season volunteering at Riverbend, rehabilitating injured wildlife. She had bottle-fed orphaned raccoons, splinted broken wings, and learned to coax trust from fear. And among them, there had been one black bear cub, small, stubborn, impossibly wild. Erin. Blair remembered her like it was yesterday. The tiny cub with the fierce eyes, who would shove her head under Blair's arm for comfort during storms. The one who had refused to eat unless Blair sat near, humming quietly under her breath. Erin had been released back into the wild once she was strong enough. And Blair had been told, as she always was, don't expect to ever see them again. But now a black bear had walked out of the forest with a dying cub and placed it at Blair's doorstep. And it wasn't just any black bear. It was her bear. The realization hit so hard that Blair had to sit down, the phone trembling in her hands. She remembered, Blair whispered, her voice cracking with wonder and grief. All this time, she remembered. On the other end of the line, Kate was silent for a moment before she said, very quietly, I think she did. Blair looked out the window again, tears blurring her vision. Outside, Erin shifted her massive body, lifting her head to stare directly at the house. Not fearful. Not hostile. Just steady. Just waiting. 6 years and countless miles had passed, and yet, when there was no one else left to trust, Erin had found her way back. Not by accident. Not by instinct. By memory. By love. And now, one way or another, Blair knew what she had to do. She owed it to Erin to bring her cub home. The drive back to the Archer farm felt longer than Blair remembered, every mile stitched with hope and fear. In the back of the wildlife transport truck, the black bear cub lay nestled inside a thick wool-lined crate, his breathing slow but steady. His tiny body, once frail and weightless in Adon Flynn's hands, now carried the subtle strength of survival. He was ready. At least, they all hoped he was. Blair sat beside Kate in the cab, hands clenched tightly in her lap. Through the windshield, the familiar fields of Montana's wild fringe stretched out ahead, mist curling along the fence posts like restless spirits. When they crested the final hill, Blair's heart caught. There, right where she had last seen her, was Erin. She hadn't left. Her enormous frame sat planted at the far edge of the field, just beyond the gravel driveway, her black coat slick with morning dew, her head lifted as the truck approached. Her body stiffened with alertness, but she didn't run. She watched. She remembered. Kate slowed the vehicle, pulling it off the road and cutting the engine. Silence swallowed them, thick and fragile. You ready? Kate asked softly. Blair nodded, though she could hardly feel her legs. Dr. Adon Flynn climbed out of the back, carefully lifting the crate with the cub inside. The little bear shifted at the movement, a soft, croaky sound escaping his throat. Not fear, but confusion. Recognition, waiting to ignite. Blair stepped forward first, moving slowly, every instinct screaming not to rush. At the sound of her footsteps on the gravel, Erin rose to her feet. Her ears swiveled forward, her nose lifting to catch the scent carried on the cold breeze. Blair could feel the weight of that moment pressing down on the field, holding the world still. Adon set the crate gently on the ground between them and unlatched the door. For one breathless heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the cub stirred. A tiny black paw reached out, followed by a clumsy tumble as the cub spilled into the grass, blinking up at the gray sky. He wheezed a thin, uncertain sound and staggered forward across the open space. Aaron rumbled. It was a sound Blair would never forget, deep, vibrating, primal. A mother's call, rising from somewhere deeper than memory. The cub froze, ears twitching. Then, with a wobbling burst of energy, he stumbled toward the sound. The distance closed slowly, agonizingly slow. Blair clenched her hands to her chest, hardly daring to breathe. When the cub finally reached her, Aaron lowered her massive head with infinite gentleness, sniffing along his back, nudging him, checking every inch. Then she let out a chuff, soft and trembling, and gathered him close, tucking his battered little body against her chest with one enormous paw. A choked sob broke from Blair's throat, and she turned away, overwhelmed. Kate didn't say a word, neither did Odin. There was nothing to say. The black bear who had once trusted a human girl 6 years ago had risked everything to find her again. Now, because of that ancient, unbreakable bond, her cub would live. As Blair watched through tear-blurred eyes, Aaron lifted her head and looked straight at her. Their gazes locked, not for long, just long enough to know, long enough for Blair to understand. This was goodbye. The bond that had pulled them back together would now release them both. Mother and son turned toward the tree line, and the mist curled around them like a curtain. With one last look back, a final chuff, low and rich with meaning, Aaron disappeared into the wild, her cub nestled close at her side. Blair sank onto the porch steps, heart full to breaking, the damp earth cool beneath her hands. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was sacred. The next morning, the mist was slow to lift from the fields. Blair sat on the porch, a blanket draped around her shoulders, her coffee long since gone cold. She hadn't expected them to stay, not after everything. Still, her heart ached with the need to look, to hope. And then, through the soft shroud of fog, she saw them. At the edge of the tree line stood Aaron, the black bear's dark form unmistakable even in the dim light. Beside her, the cub was smaller but standing. Blair rose without thinking, stepping barefoot onto the dewy boards of the porch. Aaron lifted her massive head, their eyes met across the open field, a glance heavy with meaning, with memory. Blair pressed a hand over her heart, willing her gratitude into the cold morning air. No words, no sound, only a slow, deep chuff from Aaron, a farewell, tender and certain. Blair felt tears slip down her cheeks, but she smiled through them, nodding once, without haste, without fear. Aaron turned, her cub followed, stumbling a little, then catching stride. Together, they slipped into the forest, the mist curling behind them like a curtain falling closed. Blair stood there long after they were gone, the world impossibly still around her. And though her heart ached with the weight of goodbye, she knew it wasn't lost. She felt it was something stronger, something lasting. The bond between them had not ended, it had simply returned to where it belonged, to the wild. The story spread faster than Blair could have imagined. Within days, local news stations picked up the report, a black bear carrying her sick cub to a human doorstep. Then the national outlets, then beyond. Photos of Aaron, captured at a respectful distance by Kate's team, filled headlines and social media feeds. A black bear sitting patiently in the rain, a tiny cub limp at her feet, a bear who had chosen trust over fear. Wildlife experts weighed in with cautious skepticism. Some called it coincidence, an act of desperate instinct. Others quietly admitted what the locals already knew in their bones, that this was something rare, deeper, a bond not born of domestication, not broken by time, something remembered. Blair stayed out of the spotlight as much as she could. She wasn't looking for attention, she didn't need it. She had all the proof she needed sitting on her mantle. On one side, an old photograph from her volunteer days, a much younger Blair crouched beside a young black bear cub, Aaron, who stared up at her with wide, curious eyes. On the other side, a new photo snapped quickly from the porch that misty morning, Aaron and her cub disappearing into the wild, two silhouettes framed by fading light in endless trees. Between those two pictures stretched 6 years, 1,000 miles, and a bond that no one else could ever fully understand. Blair touched the frames gently, tracing her fingers along the wood. Sometimes, she found herself standing by the window at odd hours, her gaze drifting toward the tree line. She didn't expect to see them again, that wasn't the point. It was enough to know that somewhere, Aaron and her cub were out there, living, growing, surviving, because trust had once been planted like a seed between two unlikely beings. It had taken root, and it had bloomed into a miracle. A few months later, a short feature aired on a wildlife documentary channel. They called it The Memory of the Wild. Experts debated it. Scientists analyzed it. But none of their theories captured the truth Blair carried in her chest like a secret flame. Some bonds simply don't break, not with time, not with distance, not even between species. Flynn sent a letter to Blair after everything settled. He wrote simply, "We saved the cub, but you saved the mother. You saved the memory." Blair kept the letter tucked inside a book on her nightstand, and whenever she missed Aaron, whenever the night grew heavy and the world seemed too sharp, she would open the door to the porch and listen to the wind brushing through the pines. Sometimes, she could almost hear it, a low, warm chuff, a farewell that had never really been goodbye. Because love, real love, doesn't vanish. It just moves forward, carried like a breath through the trees, like a story whispered from one heart to another. Somewhere out there, a black bear and her cub roam free, because once, long ago, trust had been given and had not been forgotten. And Blair knew, with a certainty that no scientist could measure, the wild remembers. And that's the end of the story. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to give us a like and subscribe. We would love to know your thoughts, so please let us know by commenting down below. Thank you so much for listening.